Oh, would you have a better time if...
No. I like it tighter here.
Hey, boys and girls, could you come up here and look at this? And anyone else want to see this? I need some help because it looks really empty.
What?
Yeah. Is this how clean your bedroom looks all the time?
No.
No?
It doesn't look like that.
Oh.
Mine is so messed up
It's so messed up right now? Do you want to tell me more about that? No, that's okay. That's okay. No. Do you have any idea what this... Is it a box or is it a house?
House.
Okay. Do you have any idea what this house is for?
To live in. Yeah.
Tell me again.
To live in.
To live in, yes. Well, I like this house because it's a little bigger than other houses I saw, because this is the kind of house maybe that Jesus was born in.
What?
Yeah. I think it's very close to the kind of house that Jesus was born in. But we have a problem this morning because, first of all, I don't see people.
And furniture.
Or furniture.
Or beds.
Or beds.
Or TV.
Yeah.
Or TV.
Yeah.
Or TV stand.
I think we need to do something about that. Now, in Bethlehem, where Jesus was born, there were lots of people who saw him. There were shepherds, there were wise men, there were camels. Do you remember the names of Jesus' mom and dad?
Family.
The family. Do you know any names in that family? Mom's name was Mary. And Mary's husband. Incredible Mary. And Joseph. So we need to get, I think what we need to do is go find Jesus, a manger, and Mary and Joseph. Come up here with me. Be careful for the candles here, okay? Come back this way. Okay. Do you think we need camels?
No.
I don't think we need camels.
Yes, we do.
Well, later. And wise men are not here yet. So I think what we should do, who does this look like?
The dad. What's that?
The dad. Can you hold that? That's Joseph. And Mary. And hold it very carefully. And I think, can someone hold a sheep? Oh, well, that was kind of carefully. Okay, it's carpet, it's soft. Hold it good. Hold it carefully. And this one. And who could, you want to, oh, perfect. Okay, let's see if we can get them home. And not right now, but in other Sundays coming up, we will add to the company. Where should we put them? How about let's put them down low a little further. Well, that's a little high. That's the second story, you know. I think Joseph has bad knees, so he doesn't like to climb stairs. So let's put the baby Jesus here. And we should maybe put around Jesus, Mary there, like that. Very nice. And how close should the sheep get, do you think?
Close to the mom.
Close to the mom? Okay, we can do that.
Maybe
And we can change it up every week too, okay? So now we got to start. That's a start. That's a beginning of putting together the manger scene. I like it, and you helped. Could you come back next week to help again, maybe?
Yeah.
If you can, okay. I would like that. Yeah, that'd be nice.
we didn't come for a couple of days, though.
Yeah.
I did.
Okay.
We were doing this.
Good, and that's the beginning of the story of Christmas, of Jesus' birth, and you helped. I like. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Are you going to go with Miss Lexi?
Yeah.
The godly play? Thank you.
The ancient word this morning is from Mark 13, verses 24 through 37. In those days, right after this time of suffering, the sun will become dark and the moon will no longer shine. The stars will fall and the powers in the sky will be shaken. Then the Son of Man will be seen coming in the clouds with great power and glory. He will send his angels to gather his chosen ones from all over the earth. Learn a lesson from a fig tree. When its branches sprout and start putting out leaves, you know summer is near. So when you see all these things happening, you will know that the time has almost come. You can be sure that some of the people of this generation will still be alive when all this happens. The sky and the earth will not last forever, but my words will. No one knows the day or the time. The angels in heaven don't know, and the Son himself doesn't know. Only the Father knows. So watch out and be ready. You don't know when the time will come. It is like what happens when a man goes away for a while and places his servants in charge of everything. He tells each of them what to do, and he orders the guard to keep alert. So be alert. You don't know when the master of the house will come back. It could be in the evening, or at midnight, or before dawn, or in the morning. But if he comes suddenly, don't let him find you asleep. I tell everyone just what I have told you. Be alert. The contemporary word, Blessing When the World is Ending, by Jan Richardson. Look, the world is always ending somewhere. Somewhere the sun has come crashing down. Somewhere it has gone completely dark. Somewhere it has ended with the gun, the knife, the fist. Somewhere it has ended with the slammed door, the shattered hope. Somewhere it has ended with the utter quiet that follows the news from the phone, the television, or the hospital room. Somewhere it has ended with a tenderness that will break your heart. But listen, this blessing means to be anything but morose. It has not come to cause despair. It is simply here because there is nothing a blessing is better suited for than an ending. Nothing that cries out more for a blessing than a world that is falling apart. This blessing will not fix you, will not mend you, will not give you false comfort. It will not talk to you about one door opening when another one closes. It will simply sit itself beside you among the shards and gently turn your face toward the direction from which the light will come, gathering itself about you as the world begins again. Here ends the reading.
Thank you, Pam. Yeah, I'm going to tell you this. I had every intention about preaching on that Mark passage, which, if you listened, I don't know if you listen when people read from the Bible, but it's rather dark, and frankly, it's scary to me. And when I was a little kid, I remember being assigned that reading from Mark 13, and the verse that you read, Pam, don't let the Father or don't let God find you asleep when he comes. I like to sleep, and it's just scared the heck out of me when I was a little kid, and I can't
I was going to preach on that passage until Friday. And I dumped whatever bits of sermon I had in my mind, and I went to something else. And I hope you're going to be happy with it. That's what I'm trying to say. How does Jody do this with all this paperwork, and where do you put it all? So I nixed the Mark passage, but I went with the Isaiah 64 passage, which was our opening call to worship. And I was particularly drawn to the line in the call to worship, "From ancient times, God has acted on behalf of those who wait." And then the last line of our call to worship, "We wait not in fear or despair, but in hope." Yeah, that's better. I get the chills when I read about it and when the news is still news. And I get the chills not in a good way, but in kind of this sinking feeling. After much fanfare, when it was completed in 2009, a sleek, glitzy 58-story high-rise was dedicated. On the lower level, it had high-end shopping, and on the floors above it, all the way to the 58th floor, there were 400 luxury apartments. In the heart of San Francisco. The cheapest was about maybe 700,000. The most expensive was, I think, 14 million. I said to Jody, "Let's get one." She walked away. I didn't get it. I don't get it. Professional athletes snapped them up. Silicon Valley CEOs, techies bought into it. Anyone with financial means wanted to get into what's known today as Millennium Towers. Less than 3 years after the dedication or the 2009 end of the project, the towers started to sink. To date, it has sunk 16 inches into the soft soil in the landfill of San Francisco's very expensive financial district. More than that, of course, when something sinks and something has to give on top, so at the 58th floor, it's leaning, I can't remember to the right or to the left, I guess it's your perspective, it's leaning 29 inches. 29 inches? Steel reinforcement rods and whatever else has been kind of shoved underneath the building into the soil. You know, by the way, they didn't want to go to bedrock because bedrock was like 80 feet deeper and they didn't want to spend that much money, the contractors. Good decision. And the engineers and the contractors now are saying, hey, we think we've got it. We think we've stemmed the sinking and the leaning. Walls were cracking in the upper floors. Windows were buckling, and some of the windows flew right out of the encasements and landed on the sidewalk, so they had to put a canopy on the sidewalk so that passersby wouldn't sue the city. But engineers and contractors are now saying, be patient. We are hopeful. We are hopeful. But residents can't sell their apartments quickly. You know, prices have been slashed, and everybody's angry and upset. I'd rather work in a church than be a supervisor at Millennium Towers, let me tell you. My point is, you see what happens when they don't consult with David Frost about building techniques? That's what I'm trying to say here. Well, let's get down to it. In your own personal life, and for some of you in your professional life, from your vantage point on whatever soil or bedrock you happen to be resting, are you hopeful? Are you hopeful? In the here and now, considering what you know and contemplating what your future looks like or might be like, are you hopeful? Are you hopeful? Are you on the upswing or on the comeback trail, so to speak? On a downward spiral or on resignation road? Is the wind to your back or to your face? Knowing what you've been through or recently or in some distant past, is it uphill for you or is it downhill for you? If checking one's hopefulness is akin to checking your car's engine oil, what does your dipstick say? How's that for a great illustration? How's your dipstick? Full? Down a quart? Close to empty? I realize as I'm saying this, some of you own Teslas. You don't have dipsticks or you don't have oil in those cars, do you? We could contend that one's hopefulness, that one's outlook index depends in some measure on one's circumstances. Of course it does. Is the tumor benign or malignant? Is the forecast rosy or dreary? Are the tea leaves revealing some good fortune or some really bad stuff? Will there be a Republican or a Democrat in the White House? I'm hopeful. I'm not hopeful. It all depends. In a church Jody and I once served together, some years ago, there was a most hopeful, and I'll put happy person in quotation marks, that I ever knew. Jim was in his 50s. And he loved to tell stories, and he always had a smile on his face. And many years before, he was a 4.0 U of M pre-med student. One evening during his college years, his car skidded off the road, I think it was in the winter, and wrapped itself around a tree. And his injuries, I have no better way than this to say, kind of jumbled his brain and messed up his cognitive skills. And as Jim liked to say, however, often to me, with a smile on his face, this is kind of the point I'm getting at. He says, "My accident was a gift, Reverend. It made me happy. People say I'm too happy. I'm too happy." And he was a walking encyclopedia of trivia. And I mean this in a complimentary way. He was like Rain Man with a personality, if you remember the movie Rain Man. And he was a trivia buff. And he would always throw questions at me. Many, many times he would often throw the same question at me. "Reverend, do you know who was the first person to receive an honorary degree from Harvard University?" And, because I'd heard this 8 or 9 or 12 times before, I'd kind of play along with him and say, "Oh, I don't know, was it Idi Amin? Was it Saddam Hussein?" And he'd look at me, "No. Reverend, it was Helen Keller in 1955 at the age of 75. And then he'd always end every statement, "People say I'm too happy." And St. Jim, always carried in his pockets. He usually wore baggy shirts with big, deep pockets and flaps over them. He'd have chewing gum. He'd have an assortment of ink pens, and he always had this one notepad about 3 by 5 with a spiral-bound wire on top, and he'd flip it over. That was his prayer book. He listed all the people he was praying for. And he always showed me my name. And that was one of the vast differences between Jim and me. He carried a notebook of the people he was praying for. I carry a mental notebook of the people I don't want to see again. All of this is to say, I'm hopeful because I knew Jim. And if Jim could be hopeful, for goodness sakes, who among us cannot follow his lead? He was hopeful about everything, and more particularly about everyone. I read an interesting article this past week thinking about this sermon, this message, from one of my favorite writers, and I think many of you probably know the name of Howard Zinn, Z-I-N-N. A great historian. If you ever get your hands on his, I think he sold 2 million copies of it, A People's History of the United States, you should read it. He also wrote a work which I came across recently, an essay called The Optimism of Uncertainty. The Optimism of Uncertainty. Here's a quote from it, from The Optimism of Uncertainty. In this awful world, where the effects of caring people often pale in comparison to what is done by those who have power, how do I, says Zen, how do I stay involved and seemingly happy? I am totally confident that the world, not that the world will get better, but that we should not give up the game before all the cards have been played. And he continues, not to play is to foreclose any chance of winning. To play, to act, is to create at least a possibility of changing the world. And that is a most hopeful attitude. To believe and to act from a posture and attitude of hopefulness is, in my humble opinion, the most powerful planetary force we know. All the biblical prophets knew that. Amos knew that. Hosea knew that. Jeremiah knew it. Isaiah knows it and proclaims as much in the 64th chapter, part of which was our call to worship this morning. And I quote further, from ages past, no one has heard, no ear has perceived, no eye has seen any God beside you who works for those who wait. Thus we wait, we hope, we work, not in fear and despair, but in hope. This God, I've come to believe, moves in the world and most often moves behind the scenes, raising up spiritual people, put in quote, First Congregational Church of Charlotte, Michigan. Insert your name, to enable, to tend to soothe, to care for, to lift up, choose whatever verb you want, those whom the world considers to be nobodies. Who we stand with says more about who and whose we are than any creed, any theological statement, any confession that we might make, anything we stand, who we stand with says it all. It says everything that needs to be said. I choose to be hopeful, in part because I'm standing in front of people that I know are hopeful and act in such a way. And I invite you to be full of hope in this world where people are judged still by the pigment of their skin, by the kinkiness of their hair, by the zip codes and neighborhoods in which they live, by the pronouns they use, by those they choose to create a life with, whether they live in the Gaza Strip or West Jerusalem, in gated communities or ghettos, whether they never graduated from high school or have 1 or 2 PhDs. That's how people are judged. But here's the soil from which my hopefulness grows crops. I'm hopeful because when I pass the church library across the way around 9 o'clock each Sunday morning, I see people discussing and encouraging each other. That makes me hopeful. I'm hopeful when people come together for the purpose of intercessory prayer, which happens a lot around here. I'm really hopeful. I'm hopeful because we have a church member on the city council. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because 20 to 30 people come out on a Wednesday night, I suppose, even if it's raining and snowing, and they offer up their best voices for Sunday morning rehearsal. I'm hopeful when people of all income levels, political persuasions, orientations, backgrounds, racial or ethnic, economic levels, educational levels, mental and physical limitations, find their way here into this community. I'm hopeful, and that's a big deal. I'm hopeful when people dare be vulnerable around a discussion table at Riley's Pub. That makes me hopeful. I'm hopeful when people gather in midweek classes to hear about the roots of Christianity. That makes me hopeful. I'm hopeful of people who can do such things to the sanctuary to honor the meaning of Christmas and to do it for the sake of not increasing the bottom line of the budget, but for goodness sakes and for God's sakes to give out boots and clothing and mittens and gloves and jackets. That makes me hopeful. Happened again this morning. Drove my car around Bostwick Corner, and there I see the signs in the ground. Some of them are fixed to the buildings and the railings. Sometimes they get torn down. Sometimes they get ripped up, and you keep putting them back up. That makes me hopeful. The difference between hopefulness and pessimism is illustrated, I think, so perfectly in a parable Jesus told about a good Samaritan. On a Jericho road, a man was beaten within an inch of his life, as you know the story so well. And two religious people, well, let's just call them clergy ministers, came upon the scene, and they walked by, no doubt reminding themselves and anyone who would listen, and they said, yep, it just goes to show the world's a dangerous place. It's best not to get involved. Nothing good comes out of Jericho. Nothing good happens on this road. He should have been more careful. He probably deserved it. And on their way they went, and all their pessimism went with them. And of course, as you know the story, another traveler arrived, a Samaritan, an outcast of the Jewish race, didn't give in to the pessimism of the first two travelers. His hopefulness stirred him to action. His hopefulness brought him to his knees, and where he became one with the suffering victim, his hopefulness saved a life. You save lives. Sometimes metaphorically, and sometimes, no doubt, physically, you save lives. Your hopefulness does that. And that makes me smile, just like Jim. Martin Luther King, we must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. Desmond Tutu, Bishop of South Africa before he died. Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all the darkness. And one of my favorites, National Youth Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman, spoke at President Biden's inauguration. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. Yes, I'm hopeful. And let me finish the sermon title. Yes, I'm hopeful because of you. Amen to that. I'm chuckling to myself in part because Jody obviously put the bulletin together, and she has a moment of silence here. Which is a good thing. I think she's trying to make space for the hope to come in. I have many people in ministry to tip my hat to. People that I try to emulate, but I never come close. I don't know if the name Ernest Campbell means anything to you. He was minister for 6 or 7 years at the Riverside Church in New York City. He was also minister for a time at I think it was First Presbyterian Church in Ann Arbor. So he has some ties to Michigan. He was a great orator and also a great writer of prayers. So I don't apologize for using his prayer. I'm giving him credit, but they always move me. His use of words and the seriousness with which he hones this craft. So I'd like to offer today a prayer from Ernest Campbell, the late Ernest Campbell. Let us pray. We thank you, God, that worship is therapy and gratitude the medicine of the soul. At least for the time it takes to pray, we set our minds on your mercies and give up feeling sorry for ourselves. You have blessed us with the gift of life, surrounded us with friends, trusted us with responsibility, endowed us with conscience, provided us with all things needful, and set your love upon us. We embrace in our prayers today those who live with a sense of running out of what they need, those who are running out of time, their dreams still unfulfilled, those who are running out of patience, wondering how long they can endure, those who are running out of health, who feel their powers waning day by day, those who are running out of money, fighting growing costs on fixed incomes, those who are running out of excuses and nearing the time they must assume the blame for their failures, those who are running out of faith, having borrowed too much and too long from others, those who are running out of love, finding it easier all the time to accuse and criticize and hate. O God, who alone can keep us from falling, whose power is unbounded, where our reserves are low, fill us again, for we wish to endure all the way to the very end. Through Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen. Giving to God's work is an ongoing task and responsibility of churches and people who think that they can change the world by hope. There are many ways to do that in the context of this congregation. We don't often pass the plate. I know we've done it in the past, but there are plates in the, I should say, rear of the sanctuary, or if you came in the front of the sanctuary, there are plates, and there's also a QR code, as you can see in your program this morning. You can use that. I know many of you give by credit card, online is another option to give. There are many ways to give, and your gifts, of course, are always taken seriously. And I think this is one church that doesn't waste what you give, and that's a high claim. I invite you to join me in a season of waiting, a prayer appropriate for this Advent season. O Prince of Peace, whose advent we seek, come this day and show us how to beat swords into plowshares, tools of life instead of instruments of fear. May your love strip us naked of all weapons and strategies of conquest, which are not the tools of lovers, wise ones, and God's children. Let us not lust for power, but rather strive for insight to be guided on the way of hope. Let us not yearn for a victory that requires a sister's sorrow or a brother's shamefaced defeat. Let us be disarmed and vulnerable, for only through such open hands and hearts can Emmanuel come. Thank you for joining your voices in that. I was remiss. A couple welcome cards did pass through my hands. The prayer shawl is for Brittany Miller. Diane Hudson reminded me of that. Thank you for that. I know that should give joy and relief and gratitude to Brittany. I have a prayer request, joyful anticipation for the many volunteers who helped with our sanctuary tree Saturday at 10 a.m. Indeed, that took many hands, and thank you for your willingness to do that. Also, a prayer request for the family of Bob Matchett, friend of David and Nancy. Gee, sorry. We keep that family in prayers. Thank you for. Since congregations don't always want to do what a worship leader asks them to do, I take the risk that, well, I know you can't fire me since I'm not employed, but I know there's a theme in this Advent season, and it's a theme of waiting, and that we're reminded of that when we light the Advent candle. It's one at a time. We don't light the entire candles, all the candles at one time, but it's a progression. And it is a time of waiting, and we don't do enough of waiting. We hurry around a lot, and we have busy schedules, but waiting is a spiritual thing. There are asterisks in the closing hymn, the benediction, and the postlude. And partly because Jody asked me to do this, she was hoping you'd be willing to remain seated for the hymn as you sing it, and to remain seated for the benediction as I give it, and finally to remain seated and in a waiting posture as Ramona gives us the postlude. It's obviously a little different exit plan than we're used to, but it just might sharpen our minds and soften our hearts to sit and wait. That's a good thing, and I hope you experience some of that. So our closing hymn, number 102. And the benediction is this from Jan Richardson. This blessing will not fix you, will not mend you, will not give you false comfort. It will not talk to you about one door opening when another one closes. It will simply sit itself beside you among the shards and gently turn your face toward the direction from which the light will come, gathering itself about you as the world begins again.